Well, hey there, WellHouse Church. Pastor Cullen here. Excited to be back with you for another week of storytelling. Um, you know, when I decided that I wanted to plant a church and I wanted to cast a vision for a new way, a new church, I decided that I wanted to do things different. And so I began to speak to people and we built a team to do things different. And if you've been around WellHouse Church for more than like 5 minutes, you know we do a lot of things different. One of the reasons that we do a lot of things different is because it took me embracing my other in order to realize the faults that we found in the church. You see, I walked around as the most privileged person in America. I'm a white male, identify as Christian, cisgendered, and I come from evangelical backgrounds, and now my family is in the middle class. I'm a very privileged individual, but it took me embracing the ways in which I was an other. It took me embracing the ways that I was a traumatized person, that I experienced pain, that I grieved, that I mourned. It took me embracing my otherness in order to find some of the problems and faults that I had with the church, this institution, this thing that I love so much and wanted the best for. I think that's the heart of our story today. Today we're going to look at the beginning of Acts chapter 16, where Paul ends up in a place where he's taking on a new disciple, and that new disciple's name is Timothy. Now, there are a lot of ways to look at this story, and there's a lot of details to this story, so make sure you check out tomorrow's episode of A Closer Look to get all of these details filled in. But what I want you to know today is that Timothy is a disciple. And that word means that he's identifying as a Christian following in the footsteps of Jesus. And the text says that his mother is a Jew and his father is a Greek. Okay, so what that means for the ancient world is that Timothy is not circumcised. You see, it's good for Paul because the Jewish woman always cared and nurtured and taught the child. And so he was raised Jewish, so he knows all the Jewish language and lingo. But his father, who he most looks like apparently, is a Greek. And so he's not circumcised. He's not a part of the insider crowd. But here's the deal. Timothy is who Timothy is. Timothy is living and existing as an other. He is a half-Jewish male that is not circumcised. He's not living according to the covenant. And so, Paul likes this man, and he's spoken well of by the believers. That's what the text says. So here's a disciple, someone who's been raised by a Jewish mother, and yet he embodies, his person is what would categorically be otherness of the Jewish story. And so Paul says, I want to bring this guy with me. He's spoken well of, and everyone praises him. He ends up being the pastor at the church of Ephesus, we think. But the thing that I want you to see is this. Verse 3. Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him, and he took him and had him circumcised because of the Jews who were in those places, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. As they went from town to town, they delivered to them for observance the decisions that had been reached by the apostles and elders who were in Jerusalem. So the churches were strengthened in the faith and increased in numbers daily. The churches were strengthened in faith and increased in numbers daily. I believe that that's a direct correlation because Timothy chose to embrace his otherness. You see, while Timothy may be the other to the story, I think the beautiful part of this is that Timothy, while they, the inner circle, are choosing to include the other, the outsider, the other is choosing to embrace their otherness in order to make right and strengthen the church, strengthen the faith, and increase numbers daily. You see, I think what this text is showing us is that Timothy, while on tomorrow's episode of A Closer Look, I get on Paul for forcing Timothy to be circumcised. But I also applaud Timothy for choosing to embrace his otherness. We all have an otherness, whether it be a culture, a story, a race, a color, a socioeconomic. We all have an otherness that we can tap into and embrace. And that otherness usually leads us to understanding Jesus as the liberating King, the one who liberates us from death, sin, and oppression. And so, WellHouse Church, my question for you today is, how can we be a people who embrace our otherness in order to pursue life and liberation so that we might strengthen the faith and increase in numbers daily?